Officer Nathan Keller had been with the Richmond Police Department for 6 years when he walked into a situation that would destroy his career and cost the city $21 million. He was 31 years old, experienced enough to know better, but apparently convinced that his judgment was infallible. One Tuesday morning at a funeral home in Richmond's West End, he received a call about a disturbance at a private memorial service. The disturbance was Judge Monica Reyes, a federal appeals court judge for the Fourth Circuit, standing beside her daughter's casket while a white woman who'd been estranged from the family for 15 years claimed to be the deceased's only legitimate relative. What Keller did next, arriving with backup, refusing to verify credentials, and arresting a federal judge in front of mourners at her daughter's funeral, would become a textbook example of how racial profiling destroys lives, careers, and families in their darkest moments. 6 complaints in 6 years, all 6, involving black residents in situations where Keller assumed they didn't belong: a father at his son's graduation, a woman at her own wedding reception, a teenager at his grandmother's house. Each complaint ended identically: counseling that Keller attended but never absorbed. Each incident followed the same pattern. A white person made an accusation. Keller believed them without question, and a black person's word meant nothing, even when that black person was standing beside their child's casket. A black woman in her late 50s, Judge Monica Reyes, was standing beside her daughter's closed casket in a funeral home chapel, one hand resting on the polished wood, tears streaming down her face. Her federal credentials were in her purse. Her daughter, 25 years old, dead from a car accident 5 days earlier, was 6 feet away. No crime, no disturbance, no violation, just a mother saying goodbye. But Officer Keller saw her through assumptions so distorted that he couldn't process grief as legitimate. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Let's get into what happened. Riverside Memorial Chapel sits on Grove Avenue in Richmond's West End, a neighborhood of tree-lined streets, historic homes, and old money. It's the kind of funeral home that's been serving Richmond families for 80 years. White families, mostly, though that's never stated in the brochure. High ceilings, crown molding, soft lighting, thick carpet that muffles footsteps. The main chapel holds 150 people. Smaller viewing rooms branch off the central corridor. Fresh flowers in every room. Soft organ music playing through hidden speakers. It was 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late September. The temperature outside was climbing towards 78 degrees. Inside, the air conditioning hummed quietly. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the pews. The memorial service for Isabella Reyes was scheduled for 11 a.m. Guests had started arriving at 10:30. Colleagues from the hospital where Isabella worked as a pediatric nurse, friends from her running group, neighbors from her apartment complex. About 40 people gathered in the main chapel, speaking in hushed tones, offering condolences to Judge Reyes, who stood near the front beside her daughter's casket. Isabella had died 5 days earlier, her car struck by a drunk driver on Interstate 95. She was 25 years old. Monica Reyes had planned every detail of the funeral herself: the flowers, the music, the readings, the burial plot, working through her grief to honor her daughter's memory. She'd sent the funeral home a guest list. She'd paid for everything up front. She'd made it clear: this was a small, private service, for family and close friends only. What Monica Reyes hadn't planned for was the arrival, at 10:43 a.m., of Linda Cartwright, Isabella's biological grandmother, a woman who'd been estranged from the family for 15 years, after making racist comments about Monica at a family gathering and refusing to apologize. Linda Cartwright had not been invited. She had not been told about the funeral. But she'd seen Isabella's obituary in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and she'd decided that she, as the white grandmother, was the rightful family representative. She'd walked into Riverside Memorial Chapel, seen Monica Reyes standing beside the casket, and decided that the black woman couldn't possibly be family. She went straight to the funeral director and demanded that Monica be removed from the premises. Judge Monica Reyes had spent 28 years building a legal career that few could match. She'd grown up in Richmond's East End, the daughter of Puerto Rican immigrants who'd moved to Virginia in the 1960s. Her father worked construction. Her mother cleaned houses. Neither had finished high school, but both believed their daughter could do anything. Monica graduated from Armstrong High School in 1983, valedictorian of her class. She attended the University of Virginia on a full academic scholarship, majoring in political science, graduating summa cum laude in 1987. She was one of 5 students of color in her graduating class of 2,400. She attended the University of Virginia School of Law, one of 12 Latinx students in a class of 350. She edited the Virginia Law Review. She clerked for a federal district court judge in Richmond. She joined a civil rights law firm, spending 5 years representing clients in employment discrimination and police misconduct cases. In 1997, at 32 years old, Monica Reyes was appointed as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. She prosecuted white-collar crimes, public corruption, and civil rights violations. She tried 47 cases and lost 3. Her supervisors called her relentless. Her colleagues called her the prosecutor who never missed a detail. She was appointed to the federal bench in 2007 by President George W. Bush, recommended by both Virginia senators and confirmed by the Senate 94-3. At 42 years old, she became the first Latina federal judge in Virginia history. She spent 12 years as a district court judge, handling criminal cases, civil matters, and constitutional questions with precision and fairness. Her rulings were rarely overturned on appeal. Legal scholars cited her opinions as models of clear reasoning. In 2019, she was elevated to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, one of only 12 active judges on a court that hears cases from Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. She was 54 years old, the first Latina judge on the Fourth Circuit, one of the most respected jurists in the federal system. Monica Reyes had one daughter, Isabella. She'd raised her alone after Isabella's father left when Isabella was 2 years old. She'd worked 60-hour weeks while attending every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. She'd helped Isabella with homework, taught her to stand up for herself, encouraged her to dream big. Isabella had become a pediatric nurse, working at VCU Medical Center's Children's Hospital, caring for sick kids with the same precision and compassion her mother brought to the courtroom. On September 18th, Isabella was driving home from a late shift at the hospital when a drunk driver ran a red light on Interstate 95 and struck her car at 70 miles per hour. She died instantly. Monica Reyes received the call at 11:47 p.m. She'd been reviewing case files in her home office. The Virginia State Police trooper on the phone had used the phrase, "fatal accident involving your daughter," and Monica's world had ended. 5 days later, she was standing in Riverside Memorial Chapel beside Isabella's casket, receiving mourners, trying to hold herself together long enough to get through the service. She wore a black suit, simple jewelry, no makeup to hide the exhaustion. She'd barely slept. She'd barely eaten. She was functioning on autopilot, moving through the motions because that's what you do when your child dies. You keep moving because stopping means collapsing, and there's a funeral to get through. At 10:43 a.m., Linda Cartwright walked into the chapel. Monica recognized her immediately. Linda was Isabella's paternal grandmother, the woman who'd told Monica at a family barbecue in 2008 that Mexicans shouldn't marry into decent families. The woman who'd called Isabella that half-breed girl. The woman Monica had banned from their lives and never spoke to again. Linda had not been invited to the funeral. She had not been part of Isabella's life for 15 years. But she was white, and she was elderly, and she'd decided that she, not Monica, was the legitimate family representative at this funeral. Linda walked up to Michael Brennan, the funeral director, and said, "That woman standing by the casket needs to leave. She's not family. I'm Isabella's grandmother. She doesn't belong here." Brennan, a 50-year-old white man who'd spent his entire career serving Richmond's white establishment, looked at Monica Reyes, a Latina woman in her 50s, and made a decision. He believed Linda Cartwright. Without asking for identification, without checking his records, without considering that the woman who'd paid for the entire funeral might actually be the deceased's mother. Michael Brennan called the police and reported a disturbance. "We have someone at a private funeral who won't leave. The family wants her removed." Monica Reyes, standing beside her daughter's casket, had no idea that in 2 minutes, a police officer would arrive and assume she was the problem. She had no idea that her federal credentials wouldn't matter. She had no idea that her grief was about to be criminalized because a white woman had lied, and a white man had believed her, and a white officer was about to make the worst decision of his career. Officer Nathan Keller had been with the Richmond Police Department for 6 years. In that time, he'd compiled a record that should have raised immediate red flags at every level of supervision. 6 complaints. 6. All 6 involving allegations that black residents didn't belong in spaces where Keller assumed only white people had legitimate business. The first complaint came in 2018. Keller responded to a call at a high school graduation ceremony at the Richmond Coliseum. A security guard had reported a suspicious man taking photographs. The man was Marcus Williams, photographing his son receiving his diploma. Keller detained Williams for 15 minutes, demanding identification, questioning whether he was really a parent, implying he might be a threat. Williams filed a complaint. The department's response: counseling and de-escalation training. The second complaint came 6 months later. Keller responded to a noise complaint at a wedding reception at the Commonwealth Club. The complaint came from a neighbor who didn't like the music. Keller arrived and immediately approached the bride, a black woman named Shanice Taylor, and demanded to know if she had permission to be at the venue. Shanice, in her wedding dress, holding her marriage license, showed Keller the contract she'd signed with the club. Keller asked for additional identification, implying she might be lying. The wedding guests recorded the interaction. Shanice filed a complaint. The department's response: additional training in community relations. The third complaint came in 2019. Keller was patrolling a neighborhood in Richmond's West End when he saw a black teenager, 16-year-old Jamal Thompson, sitting on the front steps of a house. Keller stopped, questioned the teenager, demanded identification, and asked if he lived there. The teenager said yes. Keller didn't believe him and demanded proof. The teenager called his grandmother, who came to the door and confirmed he lived there. She filed a complaint. The department's response: remedial training in implicit bias. The fourth complaint came in 2020. Keller responded to a call about a suspicious vehicle in a shopping center parking lot. The vehicle belonged to Dr. Amara Singh, a cardiologist who'd stopped to make a phone call before going into the grocery store. Keller approached, demanded identification, asked why Dr. Singh was loitering, and implied she might be planning to shoplift. Dr. Singh, who'd lived in Richmond for 15 years and shopped at that grocery store weekly, filed a complaint. The department's response: coaching on professional demeanor. The fifth complaint came in 2021. Keller responded to a call about a disturbance at a hotel in Richmond's downtown. A front desk clerk had reported that a black couple didn't look like they belonged there. The couple, Deshaun and Angela Morris, had a confirmed reservation, had checked in 3 hours earlier, and were staying at the hotel for their anniversary. Keller questioned them in the lobby, asking for identification, asking for proof of their reservation, implying they might be trespassing. The Morrises filed a complaint and wrote a letter to the mayor. The department's response: conflict resolution training. The sixth complaint came earlier in 2023. Keller responded to a call about suspicious activity at a community pool. The suspicious activity was 3 black children swimming while their parents watched from the deck. A white resident had called police, claiming the family didn't look like they belonged in the neighborhood. Keller arrived, approached the father, who had a resident key card visible on his towel, and demanded proof that the family lived in the community. The father, Robert Jackson, showed his lease agreement, his ID, and his key card. Keller still asked for additional verification. Robert Jackson filed a complaint. The department's response: additional counseling. 6 complaints in 6 years. Each one documented. Each one reviewed. Each one resulting in training that Keller attended but apparently never absorbed. The pattern was unmistakable. Keller responded to calls from white people who assumed black people didn't belong somewhere, and he validated those assumptions without question. He demanded proof. He questioned credentials. He treated law-abiding citizens like suspects because they were black in spaces he believed were white. When the call came in from Riverside Memorial Chapel, disturbance at a private funeral, family wants someone removed. Keller's mind filled in the narrative immediately. Private funeral home, West End neighborhood, white funeral director calling, someone who doesn't belong. He assumed it was another case of trespassing, another person who needed to be removed. He called for backup and headed to Grove Avenue, ready to remove whoever was causing problems. He never considered that the white person who made the call might be lying. He never considered that the black person might be legitimate. That failure would end his career and cost the city $21 million. At 10:51 a.m., Officer Nathan Keller and Officer Brian Walsh pulled up to Riverside Memorial Chapel. They entered through the front entrance, walking past guests arriving for the 11:00 service. Michael Brennan, the funeral director, met them in the corridor. "Officers, thank you for coming. We have a situation. The woman standing by the casket in the main chapel," he gestured toward Monica, "is refusing to leave. The deceased's grandmother has asked that she be removed." Keller looked through the doorway into the chapel. He saw Monica Reyes, a Latina woman in her 50s, standing beside the casket, one hand resting on the wood. He saw Linda Cartwright, an elderly white woman, sitting in the front pew, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. In Keller's mind, the situation was clear. Elderly white grandmother, younger Latina woman, funeral home employee requesting removal. Obviously, the Latina woman was the problem. Keller walked into the chapel, Walsh behind him. They approached Monica, who looked up as they came closer. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the casket." Monica blinked, confused. "This is my daughter's funeral. I'm her mother." Keller's expression didn't change. "The funeral director says someone's causing a disturbance. You need to leave the premises." "I'm not causing anything. I'm standing here grieving. Several people have complained. You're making the family uncomfortable." Monica's voice remained calm, but the exhaustion was audible. "I am the family. This is my child." Keller shook his head. "The deceased's mother is inside the chapel. She asked us to remove you from the property." Monica glanced at Linda Cartwright, then back at Keller. "I am Judge Monica Reyes. I am her mother. That woman inside is not family. She hasn't seen my daughter in 15 years. Keller crossed his arms. "I don't care if you're the Queen of England. You're trespassing at a private funeral. You're leaving now, or you're leaving in handcuffs." Monica's hands trembled. "Then, I guess I'm leaving in handcuffs, because I'm not leaving my daughter." The chapel had gone silent. The 40 mourners who'd been speaking quietly in the pews turned to watch. Phones came out. A colleague of Isabella's started recording. Monica's voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am Federal Appeals Court Judge Monica Reyes. I am this woman's mother. I planned this funeral. I paid for this funeral. That woman claiming to be family is my daughter's estranged grandmother, who was not invited and has not been part of our lives for 15 years. Keller's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'm not going to argue with you. You're coming with us." Monica reached slowly into her purse and pulled out her federal credentials, the black leather case with the gold badge and judicial commission. She opened it and held it up. "These are my credentials. I am a federal judge. You can verify this with one phone call." Keller glanced at the badge. "Anyone can print a fake badge. You need to come with us now." Monica's voice dropped to something cold and precise. "Officer, this is a legitimate federal judicial commission. My name is on the case file for the funeral home. My credit card paid for this service. My daughter's death certificate lists me as her mother. You are making a catastrophic mistake." Walsh, standing beside Keller, shifted uncomfortably. "Keller, maybe we should verify." Keller cut him off. "She's been asked to leave by the family. That's enough. Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back. This is where bias becomes impenetrable." Officer Keller had responded to a call about a black woman at a white funeral home. When he arrived, he saw a Latina woman standing beside a casket, and a white woman sitting in the pews claiming to be family. In his mind, that confirmed the complaint. The white woman had to be telling the truth. The Latina woman had to be lying. Every piece of evidence. After that, the federal credentials, the calm demeanor, the detailed explanation, was filtered through his initial assumption. He wasn't looking at a grieving mother. He was looking at someone trying to avoid arrest. Do you think officers should be required to verify federal judicial credentials before making arrests? Drop your answer below. Monica knew she had a choice. She could resist and risk this turning violent at her daughter's funeral, or she could comply, document everything, and fight back later with the full weight of the federal judiciary behind her. She chose documentation. I am complying under protest. She turned slowly, placing her hands behind her back. I am Judge Monica Reyes, Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. This officer is arresting me at my daughter's funeral for standing beside her casket. Everyone here is witnessing this. Please record it. Multiple people were already recording. A doctor from the hospital held up her phone. Isabella's running partner angled his, camera toward the front. Monica's law clerk, sitting 3 rows back, started recording audio. Keller pulled out handcuffs and snapped them onto Monica's wrists. The cuffs were tight. Monica winced but said nothing. You're under arrest for trespassing and disturbing the peace. I haven't disturbed anything. I've violated no law. And I'm not trespassing at my own daughter's funeral. A woman in the 4th row, Isabella's nursing supervisor, stood up. This is wrong. That's Judge Reyes. She's Isabella's mother. She planned this entire funeral. A man near the back called out, "We all know her. She's been greeting us as we arrived. That other woman just showed up." Keller ignored them. He guided Monica toward the aisle, still handcuffed, her purse left behind by the casket. Monica looked back at Isabella's coffin, tears streaming down her face. Officer Keller, you are arresting a federal judge at her daughter's funeral. You refused to verify my credentials. You ignored witness testimony. This will end your career, and it will cost your city more money than you can imagine. Walsh touched Keller's arm. Keller, seriously, maybe we should... Keller pulled Monica forward. We're done here. They walked her out of the chapel, past the mourners, through the corridor, out the front entrance. Outside, 3 more patrol cars had arrived. Monica saw what she'd expected. Cameras everywhere. Witnesses everywhere. Evidence everywhere. This was all being documented. Why do some officers interpret federal judicial credentials and witness testimony as deception? Comment your thoughts. The drive to the Richmond Police Department's West Precinct took 9 minutes. Monica spent it documenting everything mentally. Times, statements, actions. She testified in federal court dozens of times. She knew how to build a case. And this case was building itself. They arrived at the precinct at 11:03 a.m. Keller and Walsh walked Monica inside, still handcuffed, past the front desk where Sergeant David Owens looked up with immediate concern. Keller, what do you have? Trespassing at Riverside Memorial Chapel. Suspect refused to leave when asked by the funeral home and the family. Owens stood. Did she resist? She refused to comply with a lawful order. Monica spoke, her voice clear and controlled. Sergeant, I am Judge Monica Reyes, Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. I was standing at my daughter's funeral beside her casket. A woman who is not family lied to the funeral director, claiming I didn't belong there. Officer Keller arrested me after I showed him my judicial credentials, which he dismissed as fake. I complied completely. There was no resistance. This entire incident is on video from multiple witnesses. The sergeant's face went pale. She showed you federal judicial credentials? Keller handed them over. Claims they're real. Owens examined them carefully. The gold badge, the Judicial Commission, the Fourth Circuit seal, the Federal Eagle. Everything about them screamed. Authentic. Keller, these are real. Federal judicial credentials. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Could be fake. Owens's voice dropped to something dangerous. These are not fake. I've worked with federal judges. These are real. And you arrested her at her daughter's funeral? Walsh spoke up for the first time. Sarge, the funeral director, said the family wanted her removed. An elderly woman claimed to be the grandmother. Keller made a judgment call. A judgment call? Owens looked at Monica. "Ma'am, what's your commission number?" Monica recited it from memory, along with her bar number, her federal employee ID, and the direct line to the Fourth Circuit Administrative Office. Owens picked up the phone. He called the Fourth Circuit. The confirmation came back within 90 seconds. Judge Monica Reyes, active. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, appointed 2019. Owens hung up and turned to Keller, his voice cold. "You arrested a federal appellate judge at her daughter's funeral after she showed you her credentials." The funeral director called. "I don't care what the funeral director said. You verify before you arrest. That's basic procedure." He turned to Monica. "Ma'am, I am profoundly sorry." He unlocked the handcuffs himself. Monica rubbed her wrists. Deep red marks were visible where the metal had cut into her skin. A lieutenant arrived within minutes. Catherine Moore, a 24-year veteran, walked in, got briefed, and her expression darkened with every sentence. She turned to Monica. "Judge Reyes, on behalf of the Richmond Police Department, I sincerely apologize. This is inexcusable." Monica nodded but said nothing. She was building her case. Moore turned to Keller. "Badge and weapon. Administrative leave effective immediately." "Lieutenant, I was responding to a call. You arrested a federal judge for grieving at her own daughter's funeral. Give me your badge." Keller handed them over, his hands shaking. For the first time, he seemed to understand what he'd done. Should officers face automatic termination after wrongful arrests at funerals? Drop your answer below. Within 90 minutes, the videos had exploded across social media. Multiple angles from different mourners. Monica identifying herself, showing her credentials, being handcuffed at her daughter's casket, being walked out of her own daughter's funeral in front of dozens of witnesses. Federal judge arrested at daughter's funeral for refusing to leave her child's casket. Judge handcuffed at funeral after estranged white relative lies to police arrested for grieving. While Latina, federal judge detained at daughter's memorial. The outrage was immediate and intense. The federal judiciary issued a statement condemning the arrest in the strongest terms. The Fourth Circuit chief judge called it an unconscionable violation of judicial dignity and human decency. Legal organizations demanded accountability. Civil rights groups called for federal intervention. The funeral director, Michael Brennan, gave a statement to local media. "I relied on information from someone who identified herself as family. I was mistaken, and I deeply regret calling the police." He was fired within 48 hours. Riverside Memorial Chapel issued a public apology and paid an undisclosed settlement to avoid being named in the lawsuit. Linda Cartwright, the grandmother who'd started everything, gave one brief interview. "I thought I was helping. I didn't know she was a judge." Then she deleted her social media accounts and disappeared from public view. But the real damage was done. The videos showed everything. A federal judge, professionally dressed, standing beside her daughter's casket, showing credentials, being arrested anyway. Civil rights attorneys contacted Monica within hours. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. This was racial profiling. This was a violation of federal civil rights. This was proof that even a federal judicial commission wasn't enough to protect Latina women from bias. The lawsuit was filed 3 months later. It named Officer Nathan Keller, Officer Brian Walsh for failure to intervene, Sergeant David Owens for supervisory failure, Lieutenant Catherine Moore for systemic training failures, Michael Brennan personally, Riverside Memorial Chapel corporately, and the Richmond Police Department institutionally. The claims were extensive: unlawful arrest without probable cause, false imprisonment, violation of federal civil rights under 42 U.S.C., Par of 1983, racial and ethnic profiling and discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with protected mourning activities, failure to verify credentials despite repeated requests, and failure to train and supervise officers with documented patterns of discriminatory policing. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached an immediate conclusion: indefensible. The videos were everywhere. The witnesses were credible. The victim was a federal judge. The federal judiciary was watching. The Department of Justice was monitoring. The city settled within 7 months, paying $21 million to Judge Monica Reyes, the largest settlement in Richmond Police Department history. Riverside Memorial Chapel contributed an additional $3.8 million from their liability insurance. Michael Brennan paid $50,000 from personal funds. Officer Nathan Keller was terminated 6 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was final and devastating. Officer Keller arrested a federal appellate court judge without probable cause at her daughter's funeral, refused to verify legitimate federal judicial credentials, and engaged in racial profiling. Despite 6 prior complaints involving similar patterns of discriminatory behavior toward people of color, and despite multiple training interventions, Officer Keller continued to demonstrate biased policing practices. His employment is terminated immediately, and his certification is revoked. Keller's name was entered into the National Decertification Index. His law enforcement career was over at 31 years old. Officer Brian Walsh received a 30-day suspension for failure to intervene. The Richmond Police Department faced intense scrutiny. How had Keller, with 6 complaints over 6 years, remained on patrol? Why hadn't supervisors removed him after the 3rd complaint? The 5th. What training existed to prevent officers from arresting people for existing while brown? Internal Affairs conducted a comprehensive review. The findings were damning. 6 complaints over 6 years, 0 sustained. Multiple witnesses ignored. Training completed but never assessed for effectiveness. Supervisors who noted problems but took no action. A system that protected officers over community members. The Department of Justice opened a pattern and practice investigation. Reforms were announced. Immediate desk duty for any officer with 4 or more complaints related to discrimination. Mandatory credential verification protocols. Real-time body camera review for all arrests. Independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power. Quarterly pattern analysis flagging racial disparities. Should businesses and officers face federal penalties for racially motivated removals from private events? Let me know in the comments. Keller's career was over. That's consequence. The city paid $21 million. That's accountability. Brennan was fired. That's justice. But none of it undid the trauma of being arrested at your child's funeral. None of it restored the dignity of being handcuffed in front of mourners while saying goodbye to your daughter. Judge Monica Reyes testified at federal hearings 6 months after the incident. Her testimony was powerful, precise, and devastating. I am a federal appellate court judge. I have served on the bench for 16 years. I have a law degree from the University of Virginia. I have tried 47 cases as a prosecutor. I have written more than 200 judicial opinions. I have been confirmed by the United States Senate. I carry federal credentials that grant me access to secure federal facilities across this country. She paused. On September 24th, I stood beside my daughter's casket at her funeral. Isabella was 25 years old. She died in a car accident. I was her mother. I raised her alone. I planned her funeral myself. I invited every person who was there. Another pause. A woman who had not seen my daughter in 15 years. A woman who made racist comments about me that led to her being estranged from our family. Walked into that funeral home and told the director that I didn't belong there. The funeral director believed her. He didn't check his records. He didn't ask for identification. He saw a white woman claiming to be family and a Latina woman standing by the casket, and he decided the white woman was telling the truth. Her voice remained steady, but the pain was audible. Officer Keller arrived. I identified myself immediately. I showed him my federal judicial credentials. I explained the situation calmly and clearly. I offered to provide documentation. I had witnesses, 40 people who knew me, who knew I was Isabella's mother, who'd been greeting me all morning. It didn't matter. Officer Keller looked at my credentials and decided they were fake. He looked at the witnesses and ignored them. He looked at me, a Latina woman in a black suit standing beside my daughter's casket, and he saw a criminal. She looked directly at the committee members. I was arrested at my daughter's funeral. I was handcuffed and removed from the chapel. I was driven to a police station in the back of a patrol car. while my daughter's body remained at the funeral home. I missed the beginning of her memorial service because I was being processed like a criminal. My daughter died, and I couldn't even grieve in peace because someone assumed I didn't belong there. Final pause. This happens every day to people who don't have federal judicial credentials, to people who don't have resources to fight back, to people whose arrests don't make national news. If this can happen to me, a federal judge with 28 years in the legal profession, what happens to everyone else? What happens to the Latina mother who isn't a judge? What happens to the black father who isn't a prosecutor? What happens to them when bias decides they don't belong? Should racial profiling at funerals and memorial services trigger automatic federal civil rights investigations? Drop your answer below. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. This was proof that for some people, no credential is enough when bias has made its decision. Judge Monica Reyes showed her federal judicial commission. She identified herself verbally, clearly, repeatedly. She was professionally dressed, surrounded by witnesses, violating no law. And none of it mattered because Officer Keller saw a Latina woman in a space where his biased mind said Latina women didn't belong as legitimate family members. The credentials had to be fake. The witnesses had to be mistaken. The calm professionalism had to be an act. The grief had to be performance. His bias was so complete, it overrode physical evidence held in his hands. This is how systemic racism operates in everyday spaces. It's not always violent or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, insidious, built on assumptions that seem reasonable until examined. It's a funeral director who sees a Latina woman and assumes she can't be the deceased's mother. It's an officer who sees federal credentials and assumes they're counterfeit. It's a system that validates those assumptions until someone with power and resources fights back. And when that bias is backed by the authority to arrest, to handcuff, to remove someone from their own daughter's funeral, it doesn't just harm individuals. It sends a message. You don't belong here. No matter your credentials, no matter your grief, no matter your humanity. 6 complaints in 6 years. That's not bad luck. That's not mistakes. That's a pattern. A pattern the Richmond Police Department ignored until it targeted someone with the power to expose it. Every complaint told the same story. Keller assumed people of color didn't belong in certain spaces, demanded proof of legitimacy, and treated innocent people like criminals. Each time, he received training. Each time, nothing changed. The pattern was clear. The documentation was extensive. But somehow, Keller remained on patrol until he arrested a federal judge at her daughter's funeral in front of dozens of witnesses with cameras. Nathan Keller's career is over. That's justice. The city paid $21 million. That's accountability. Michael Brennan was fired. That's consequences. But money and terminations don't undo the trauma of being arrested while saying goodbye to your child. They don't restore the dignity of being handcuffed in front of mourners at your daughter's memorial service. They don't erase the message that even a federal judicial commission isn't enough to protect you from bias. The real question is, what changes now? Does Richmond finally remove officers after 4 complaints instead of 6? Do funeral homes finally verify information before calling police? Do we finally acknowledge that making people uncomfortable often means existing while brown or black in spaces where bias says you don't belong? Because if we don't fix the systems that kept Keller on patrol for 6 years, despite 6 complaints, if we don't address the culture that taught Brennan to believe a white woman over documentation and common sense, then we're just waiting for the next officer, the next funeral director, the next judge, the next parent, the next funeral, the next arrest. Comment if you believe this should be law. Officers and businesses that remove people from private events based on racial bias, without verifying credentials or claims, face mandatory federal civil rights review and financial penalties. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the judges, the mothers, the grievers, the ordinary people who deserve to say goodbye to their loved ones without being criminalized for the color of their skin. This isn't just about one officer or one judge or one funeral. It's about all of us and the world we choose to accept.